Surviving the Apocalypse with special guest Piero San Giorgio. Giorgio. I'm not sure how to say that. My grandmother would be ashamed of me. I'm part Italian. Anyway, this episode's been very exciting. Obviously, focused on the current pandemic that everyone is facing around the world. And also, we'll also be joined by Noah Ravoy. Before we get it, bring both of these guys on, our special guest today, like I said, is the author of this book, co-author, Piero. He's actually a former speaker from the 21 Convention 2019 in Warsaw, Poland, where I got to meet him last year. This is him speaking at the convention. And here in the Redman group as well with George Bruno, Ivan Throne, Steve the Dean Williams in Poland. Actually, we filmed this coming out soon. He's also the author of Survive, badass book. You can get that on Amazon. Surviving the Economic Collapse. He's also the author of a book I do not have yet, but I'll show it to you in a minute, CBRN, which he co-authored with somebody. I'm not sure the co-author. Oh, Chris Millennium. And that's on surviving chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear events, including the coronavirus. It was written a couple years ago, but the coronavirus is obviously beyond just the one we're facing now. Without further ado, welcome to the show, Piero and Noah Ravoy. How's it going, boys?
Here. Hello. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for coming on. Good to talk to you again. It's been a little while since we spoke.
Yeah.
So, yep. Now, how you guys doing today? What do you guys... Yeah, everybody's surviving. I don't see any gas masks or zombies at your door. Piero, are you in France or Switzerland?
I'm in Switzerland, and as a matter of fact, just as you were calling, I was putting some extra masks.
Nice.
In a small package that I will send to some friends who work in ambulance services in Geneva, in town, here in Switzerland, because I don't need that. I'm confined in my beautiful farm in the mountains. It's we play outside with the children. I don't need the stuff anymore. So I'm keeping 3 or 4, and then I have some that I reuse when I go to do groceries, and the rest I'm sending to people who actually need it. So see, we preppers and survivalists, we store stuff, we prepare stuff, but when it's needed, we're there to help.
Yeah, fuck yeah. Yeah, talk to me a little bit more, and we'll talk to Noah as well. Noah's actually based in Portugal right now, in Europe, and you're in Switzerland. So talk to me about Switzerland first, Piero. I'm here in Florida in America, so I can give I can feel what the whole state's like. I've been driving around the state actually, getting a feel for it. How are things in Switzerland? One of the safest places in the world, I imagined.
We are confined, not to the extent that Italy is, but the government is encouraging and asking people to stay as much as possible home. Most of the shops are closed except for pharmacies and foodstuffs and shops that provide food for animals, for people who have animals at home, such as crop farmers, things like that. So we are in a quite unique, and I think it never happened before, situation, just as most of Europe now. As the epidemic progressed, and we will maybe discuss later how mismanaged this thing has been. One country after another has shut down, and eventually we need to be as able as possible to help each other, and also to keep our spouses, children, and neighbors in good we need to be in good relationships, because 1 or 2 months, I think it's going to be more likely to be 2 months at least. It's a long time when you need to be together, and we're lucky here. I have a farm in the mountains. I live in a farm, so it's it's very easy to go stroll in the forest, and you go with the kids in the fields, and it's really nice. If you live in a 50 square meter apartment, 4 people in the city, it's much harder, and we'll probably talk about that. But I predict a lot of divorces, and sadly, I predict a lot of murders.
Holy shit, Jesus! Probably a lot of babies too, huh? People running out of condoms and stuff.
Not mutually, nothing is mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Well, when you're isolated with someone, your relationship becomes more of what it was. So if it was good, it becomes better. If it was bad, it becomes worse. So it makes it more of what it was. It puts it to the extremes. And my wife and I, we spend a lot of time together anyway. She works from home part of the time. most of the time that she works is from home, and I work from home as well. So we're always spending time together. For us, the all that it's meant is that we don't go out so much. We don't take the kids to the park, but otherwise it's pretty much the same. We're under quarantine here in Lisbon as well. Or I'm not in Lisbon, I'm just outside of Lisbon, but it's at the moment, it's everyone's very positive, very happy. It's been the first week. It's kind of a vacation. And as things drag in, we're going to see what really people are made of. And I think it's going to depend a lot on the local culture as well. If you have a culture that is very cut off from their neighbors, or a culture that is very individualistic, I think it's going to be more difficult to get through this than a culture where people are very cooperative with each other and where they know their neighbors. And I'm very happy here in Portugal that in general, people are very calm. They're very, very positive, very calm. There's a bit of nervousness, but I'm not seeing aggression. I'm not seeing people getting upset. There's not been a crime bump, nothing like that. So far it's been good, but it's also been a very short period of time.
Yeah, and Portugal is a country of about 10 million people. How big is Switzerland? How many millions are there?
Yeah.
Okay, similar, yeah. Yeah, in Florida, I think we have over 20 million in our state. And things every day I've noticed, I go to the grocery store usually once a day, every other day, for now anyway. And I'm kind of keeping a vibe or a feel for how the people around me in these communities and where I live, and then also where my family lives. I went to visit them the other day. And every day that goes by, people are a little bit more antsy, a little bit more nervous. There's more masks. You see the frequency of those N95 masks and things like that. More people are wearing those. There's more. You can feel people even like if you're near them in line, they get tense, they get antsy, and it's interesting to see. I've never seen anything like it in my life. Obviously, there's been in America we had 9/11 back in the day, and there's been other epidemics and things that happened, but yeah, this is pretty amazing. It's there's a lot I want to get into with you, Piero, and as well with you, Noah. I really like what you said, by the way, Noah, and I agree with you that this is going to be a stress test. I think is a way to encapsulate what you were saying for relationships, marriages, boyfriend, girlfriend, and everything in between, as well as with your children and things like that. A lot of people are used to the government, of course, taking care of their children all day, every day. So, before we get more into the show, Piero, can you tell us more about your background? As far as I understand it, well, first of all,
Sure.
you were introduced to me by Jack Donovan, a veteran speaker of the 21 Convention at this point, a good mutual friend.
Yep.
And as I understand it, you're Europe's top survivalist author and expert. Is that about right?
Well, my background is actually in software. I was, managing software companies for 20 years across developing markets, and traveled across over 100 countries, and I really know the world. And in 2005, I started to feel that the economic system is eventually going to collapse sooner or later. And I started to work on, to dive deep into the survivalist and prepper culture, and started to apply some of it for myself with my family. And indeed, we bought the farm. We got into this farm here in the beautiful mountains in Switzerland, and started to grow. What we try to do is self-sufficiency. It's not just storing beans and have stores of food. It's about growing a lifestyle that aims to have freedom, and freedom through self-sufficiency, so that we don't need the state, we don't need others as much as possible. You will always need your neighbors, of course. So we we integrated ourselves into the local community. And so, indeed, since 2011, I came out with my first book, which you mentioned, which you have now translated, of course, in English, and which has become, an international bestseller. I think it's about 11 languages now, or something like that. But
Wow.
It's a book that, from English to Turkish to Romanian to Italian, has been teaching people the basics on what is the strategy to have. Because you can find a lot of books on gardening, you can find a lot of books on how to shoot, you can have books on how you build your solar panels at home, do it yourself. You can find all those sorts of things, but what you need is a strategy, so that you don't become the crazy survivalist guy that the media make fun of. They show this guy who's a half crazy in the bunker with lots of gun and a bit paranoid.
Shit.
Yeah, which is not common. That almost doesn't exist. Find that one, so they caricature the image. And on the other hand, you have the old cat lady that has its home, a little garden with some aromatic herbs, but that's the other extreme. It doesn't bring you the community and the self-sufficiency that you need to be really a free man, which is what we want. And free man means a free people, and that means a free nation. All of things we are not today. We have none of that anymore. And so 4 years ago, was it 5 years ago, the head of the anti-terrorist French police, which has a unit that is one of the world's most respected anti-terrorist units, contacted me and said, look, I'm the head guy for the nuclear, radiological, biological, and chemical warfare anti-terrorist group. And I think you are weak in one point, which is the nuclear, radiological, biological, and chemical warfare. And I'd like to write a book with you. And so here it is. Here's the book that you have. I just got the first copy yesterday through mail. And this book tells, I'm right on the right page, tells about how you can survive nuclear war. And yes, you can survive nuclear war if you do certain steps. How you can survive biological problems such as epidemics, as well as chemical industrial accidents and things like that. And we take examples throughout history, of course, and clearly, chemical accidents like the accident in Bhopal in India in 1984 is an interesting example. But in the case of epidemics, we are studying in this book through history epidemics from Athens, the plague of Athens in 754, I think, and then there was and then more in the Middle Ages, the well-known Black Death, the Black Plague of the 14th century, 1348 and 1349, that wiped out half of the population of probably India, China, and Europe. And we explored a little bit how the people react and how they behave. And now, of course, as we have modern science, we understand why they have these epidemics. And we not only understand the dynamics, but also the causes. And so we can plan responses much better. And so this book was really I'm really lucky that it comes out in English right now, because people who buy it and read it can actually prepare for the next one. Because for this one, I think we're all stuck at home and we have to do is what we have. But it will give you the right attitudes and some of the tools that you need for the next one. Because I hear a lot of nonsense in the news. We have self-proclaimed experts or people who are supposed to be experts who say completely idiotic things since January. And I've been following this on the social networks since beginning of January, and I've been telling to the people, first of all, don't panic. This is not the kind of crisis you should panic. This is not the end of the world. This is not the apocalypse. This is not something that will kill you. Most likely it's not. Second thing, you still have a little bit of time to prepare. We're in January. This thing is going to hit us in February or March. Get the food, the supplies, get everything ready. Go to the dentist, get your teeth ready, because you don't know how long this is going to last. Maybe nothing happened. Maybe it doesn't kill a lot of people. Maybe it does. In January, we couldn't know. You can't trust Chinese numbers. This is a communist government. You don't know what they tell you.
Yeah, I'm amazed that anyone believes that shit. Like, it's an absolute, communist dictatorship. Who the fuck would believe any of this crap?
No, and still today, we don't know. We don't know what they had.
It's partially cultural, too. If you read The Art of War, they explained in there that the Chinese way of dealing with war is that if things are good, you say they're bad, and if things are bad, you say they're good, so that your enemy will misestimate the response they should have. So when you're listening to the Chinese government, it's the opposite of whatever the official position is. That's what's actually happening. And I think anyone that understands dealing with big Chinese bureaucracies is that's how they read it when they read the newspaper.
Yeah, it sounds like talking to women, speaking womanese, Chinese. Maybe that's what we call womanese. Yeah. Piero, talk to me about survival attitudes. I was going through Survive, your book, and that just kind of popped out of me immediately, even before thinking about preparedness, what you think about the situation, how the governments have handled it, how to prepare further, things like that. Survival attitude, that sounds very important for men.
Yeah. So often the media ask me, what's your definition of a survivalist? And I say survivalist is responsible citizen and responsible husband and father that plans what could happen in the future so that it doesn't have to suffer if something happens. So basically, it's being a responsible adult. And that's why they don't invite me anymore, because this is not a crazy answer. They look for the crazy answer. But the real answer is that we want to be responsible. And since the dawn of time, responsible men have provided for the family. And one way to provide is to plan ahead what could happen. Because there's always a war. There's always a drought. There's always food that is not going to come as planned.
Hurricanes.
And so, you plan for stuff. Yeah. And this is nothing more, and but nothing less. It's a lot of work. And in today's world,
it sounds very masculine too, like leadership and strength and courage and mastery, like Jack Donovan talks about. And these weak beta males don't do that shit.
Yeah.
Well, we're all descended from men who planned ahead for their family and survived. The ones who didn't all died. So we're descended from the men that were responsible.
Yeah, except in the last 70 years, where basically that pressure has gone because of the nanny state and because of the great stuff from modern world. I mean, we don't. We have supermarkets, we have just-in-time supply chains, we have all these wonderful things that provide us everything we need, that cure us whenever we have any little illness, until it doesn't work anymore. And now we are testing that. Now, let me reassure people who watch us. Again, this is not the apocalypse. And when the virus started to hit Europe in Italy, which is my home country, I'm originally Italian, and I have lots of people, a lot of family there, a lot of contacts, I started to get the real feel of the data and figure out that what is happening.
He froze up. I think he'll be back in a second, guys. Just hang on.
Are we still
on? Piero, yeah, you had a connection interruption. Yep. I think you're fine now. You're back.
Okay. So there's three problems with such an epidemic. The first one is the sucker, the bastard virus itself. Is it going to kill you? Are you going to get it? Are you going to die from it? When it was from China, the data was Chinese, we had no idea. And as it started to grow in Italy, I started to look at the data. I called a few friends who worked there, and I got the numbers, and I started to understand what's happening. So this thing is very contagious, but it doesn't kill a lot. It kills mostly people who have immune system are majority old people who have also problems with the breathing, because this virus is peculiar on attacking your pulmonary system, as most coronaviruses do, as we explain in the book, by the way. And eventually people of any age, but who have severe health problems, such as severe obesity, who have severe lung problem. So it doesn't kill a lot of people. It's probably going to be 0.5% to 1% of the population who is really going to suffer from this. 99% of the people don't have this kind of problem. Maybe a little bit less in countries where you have mostly obese people, but it's not a lot. Now in Italy you have a lot of old people. That's true, and this is why they had very high numbers at the beginning, and now we can start to feel it starting to drop. And so that's a very reassuring message, that we are not going to die. This is not the zombie apocalypse virus from the movies. This is just another virus, and it's more than the flu. Yes. So people who said, no, it's nothing. No, it's more serious, but it's not that bad. So we are lucky that this is not that bad.
What are your thoughts on the virus killing people who basically the hospitals get overwhelmed, and then that would maybe bump the death rate up to 3-4% or something like that?
Well, that's the second problem. The second problem is that as we started, because this is the culture of the modern world, we try to save everyone. Yeah. And I'm not going to judge whether that is good or bad. But as you start to have people who are ill and have problems of breathing and go to the hospitals, well, then the hospitals treat them in priority, because it is an emergency. And because that quickly overwhelms the hospital capacity to treat that kind of illness, you basically run out of hospital rooms. You also fatigue and weaken the personnel, the hospital doctors, the nurses, and so on, who become weak because they don't sleep, because they work 3 shifts every day, because unfortunately that's the profile, the psychology profile of these people. They are dedicated, they're great people, but they work too hard when they need to do, and therefore they weaken themselves, and therefore they also get infected, and some of them even die, which is a complete nonsense, because no doctor's life, no nurse's life is worth an old guy of 80 years old. I'm sorry to say, but people who are 80-year-old, they've had their life, too bad. But the doctors, they are saving lives every day. Tomorrow they may save my children. Tomorrow they may save some baby who's born with a problem, or a delivery with problems. Today, all of this may add to the problems of the hospitals, and this is why they have decided to try to contain as much as possible the progression by having this confinement. Now, this is too little, too late, but you had to do it. And this is why our governments and the health officials across the world, today is not the time to blame them. But when this crisis is over, we will need to go to see this guy and say, hey, you knew from January that this was serious, because I knew it. I knew it end of January that this was serious, because I started to have Italian data. And you knew it as well. So Italy acted fast, good for them. But France didn't act. US, I'm sorry, for once I have to say bad things. They didn't act fast enough. Now, granted, it's like Switzerland, it's decentralized. It's not the central government to decide it. Switzerland also was late. We were way too late. Fortunately, we don't have a lot of deaths in Switzerland, but the hospitals are overwhelmed. This is why I have my friends in the ambulance service calling me, crying, and say, "Hey, you guys, you survivalist guys, do you have extra masks?" So I have few masks. I'm not these for $100 a piece on the internet. I'm giving them for the guys who work in ambulances, because they need to work. Not for the people who have this virus, but for the others as well. What happens if you break your leg? What happens if you have a heart attack? What happens if you need absolutely to go to the hospital? What if the ambulance people are all ill? Well, and they will recover. It's not that bad, but maybe you have 1 week with the fever and you cannot work. Yeah. But at least they can protect. So we have to think forward to that. And the third problem, which is something that we are entering right now, is that after China, one of the world engines, has shut down. Now we have Europe and the United States, which are the consumers, which are shutting down. We stay home, and we must stay home, and we are consuming much less. And therefore, who's going to restart the economy when this restarts? So this is a question mark. I have good confidence that it will be restarted pretty well, but it's a very interesting test, and it was in January a bit scary because you could predict this. So I think we'll cope it. I'm actually quite positive right now, but I can tell you February was a month of stress for me, because I was starting to look at the economy inevitably shutting down, and we have never done this in a global scale.
Well, America, the stock market too is super, super high. It was higher than it ever been. So it's now being reset from that, or bumping down. Yeah, it's been wild.
Yeah, historically, whenever there's been a massive viral outbreak or a plague of some sort, it's had, for the survivors, there has been some benefits. Land is cheaper when suddenly there's half as many people, and we're not going to have that happen, but there is usually a recalculation of costs. And I think that's going to happen at the end of this virus. I've talked to a lot of people in responsible positions in big companies, working with some other projects that I did. And a lot of them expressed the concern to me that their businesses have become overly politicized. And that they told me, unless we have some sort of catastrophe, we're not going to be able to realign for efficiency again. We're not going to be able to, we have entire departments that are not contributing to the bottom line. They're just here to make political satisfaction. I've talked to people in government saying the same thing, that many of the people that are in positions of power understand what needs to be done. But they said, if we tried to implement what needs to be done, we would never get voted in again, and we would go to a far left. The collapse would happen faster and without control. And so I think that this coronavirus is going to be used as a catalyst and a scapegoat to make certain changes to the global economy and to global governments that needed to be made but couldn't politically be made. And now there's an excuse. I mean, 3 weeks ago we had open borders across the world pretty much. This week, I'm in Portugal and they're saying no, not even the Spanish tourists. So and nobody's saying that because you close the borders, you're some sort of a horrible person now. In fact, if we didn't close the borders, then you'd get criticized. It's really things, when change happens, it happens very quickly, and it tends to go completely in the opposite direction of what it was before. So we're seeing the unexpected become normal.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I wanted to pull up this tweet real quick. Sorry about that, but I put out a tweet, and it was just yesterday, I think. It was 2019. Trump is an authoritarian. 2020, harder, daddy. Because in America, everybody now is, Trump all of a sudden is president. He's my president, and his approval rating's going up, and they're like, they want the most draconian measures they can as fast as they can, whether or not it's wise. They just want it. So it's funny, all these people that hate him, all of a sudden now he's their president. So
well, it's interesting. What Noah said is absolutely correct. And 3 weeks ago in the UK, the main story in the news was that there was this young man, girl, we don't know, he was a non-gender specific person who complained and it was reported on all news that he couldn't find a hairdresser for his gender because you have a hair salon for men or for women, and he was complaining that there are no hair salons for non-defined gender people. Well, that's not news anymore.
Yeah.
So indeed, all this shit about this crazy babies, anal stage society, as some people call it, where we have regressed to the intellectual and emotional level of a 3-year-old. This was wiped out completely, and no one is about that. And now people are trying to haggle for masks at $100 a piece, and which is also silly. But the craziness of societies is a sign of decadence, which is a sign of too much luxury.
Yeah.
And therefore, this is a very and we have it at low cost. Believe me, this is not a bad virus, because some people go with the theory about I have sunset on my face. Some people say, oh, this is a bioengineered weapon and so on. Well, of course not. Come on, do you think they will engineer a weapon that only kills 1% of the people and that kills the old people at that? Of course not. A bioweapon kills the young, kills the army age people. This is not a bioengineer. It could be out of a laboratory by mistake. Yes, perhaps. This is not a bioweapon. We explained in the book how you develop bioweapons and what is the history of bioweapons. And there is a lot of examples of bioweapons having been invented in the last century. I mean, Soviet Union, United States, Israel, South Africa. There's a lot of laboratories who have data on what they did and what they were researching. And these are major killers, but they're not very spreading. They don't spread very much because you want to be focused. It's like carpet bombing is not so efficient, whereas the precise munition is. Same for viruses. You don't want to use a virus to do war. You want to use toxins. You want to use anthrax. You want to use weaponized anthrax, not this kind of viruses. This is not a killer. So we are very lucky that we can use this kind of virus and this kind of crisis now. First of all, on a human level, I think Noah has a lot. We discussed this when we met in Poland. That was very, very interesting. That on a human level, we will learn, and hopefully in a good way, because as you said, if your relationships with the people around you are bad, they will get worse, and this is a big problem. But we will learn again to know our family, to learn to know our neighbors, to know who are our real friends. And because this is not about social network stuff, it's about your real physical, the friends that are around you. Maybe we will change the way that, I have a friend in California and I have my best friend in Japan. And no, they're too far. It's great that you have these friends, but the real friends are needed next to you. and maybe you should focus on the people who are next to you, or maybe you move to people that you feel good with. And the same with your job. Why do you spend all your time in a job that you don't like, which is what happens to most of the people? Why do you spend time with your wife that you don't like? And so on and so on. A lot of people will ask all these questions. And a lot of wives would say, well, why am I spending time with this guy? But we knew that already. However, on the human level, this is very important. And then, of course, there will be the changes that Noah just mentioned on the international and on the cultural level, which for most of them are impossible to predict, because indeed they are, as the Black Plague completely changed Europe, this virus will completely change the face of global culture in ways we cannot even imagine right now. And it will be super exciting to be part of the people who, because we have predicted this before, that could perhaps give the right direction so that we don't move back into the crazy stuff that we lived in the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, so some examples of that would be open borders, becoming closed borders, migration, slowing way, way down. But I know even in America, so I'd look, like if you have some more examples, but in America now we're seeing the federal government tell everyone to homeschool their children, which is in America, this is hysterical. The federal, the Federal Department of Education used to not even exist, and they were trying to abolish it in America until the 1990s, when I was a kid. They didn't want it, and there's no constitutional provision for it. But now they're telling everyone to be homeschool, which is probably the best thing anyway for your children, out of the government socialist bullshit that you're taught, which came I think from Europe. It actually came from Germany or some shit.
Yeah, it came from Prussia. Here we did a soft quarantine for about 2 and a little more weeks before we did the hard quarantine. The soft quarantine was all the bars were closed at 9 o'clock, so nobody's out drinking until late at night. They're at home. We discouraged the tourists, who are very disruptive to the local culture, because they come in and make a lot of noise when people want to go to sleep or have their kids, and that was gone. So women were at home looking after their kids. The bars were closed. People were eating dinner with their families. It was like the 1950s again. Yeah. And it basically, 1 week to the next, everything changed. And you mentioned that we talked about how a lot of people are going to say, oh, my marriage isn't good. For those who are thinking like that and saying, oh, I'm already having problems, now it's going to get worse, that is a choice. It's still a choice you make. You can choose to fix it. And there's no better time to do it than when you're stuck at home. And nowadays, hey, we have things we couldn't imagine 20 years ago. We can have a conversation with 3 people on 3 different parts of the globe. If you need help, you can find a marriage therapist who's online. You can find or a priest or whatever it is that you happen to feel trustable, that you can trust to give you advice. But now's the time to go out and do that. Start. The people who invest in the bad times are the ones who get the best return. The people that ignore the problem and just kind of hunker down and do nothing, actually they end up with often the worst situation of all.
Piero, talk to me about the collision. I saw this in your book, in Survive, and I like this idea a lot. I know it has a lot of value, and our guys I don't think they know about it. Talk to me about the collision between a natural disaster like this, a pandemic, a virus. I agree with you. I don't think it's a bioweapon, so it's just part of nature. It's some stupid shit happening. And then I think you're right, too. It's pretty cheap. It's going to kill a small percentage of people compared to like the Black Plague, which killed, half the population of Europe. So talk to me about the collision between a natural disaster like this and the economic man-made disaster that we're seeing. I don't know if you see, associated with it now. The economy is shutting down. The stock market's, under fucking crazy volatility. Unemployment, they're saying, could go to 20% in America, which is super, super high. So we're seeing the collision between nature and, pretty unstable economic system in the first place. Everything's built on credit and on debt. All this, stacking of insane and all this banking shit we do. That's been going on for a while. That's not new. And that's probably a bubble that's going to pop anyway.
Yeah, well, the economies from 10,000 years ago always have been based on very close relationships between people who produce stuff, food and whatever they manufacture, and the people who eventually consume them. And as the complexity grew, with computers, we started to figure out ways to make sure that there is no inventory, as little time as possible from production to consumption. And therefore, we have this concept of just in time that was invented by the Americans, but really applied in Japan and then expanded all over the world, the Toyota model. And this amazing concept is great for profit, is great for companies, especially thing area. No one thinks about, hey, is there a problem with having all our medication, all the antibiotics built manufactured in China? Of course not. It's cheaper. Let's do it so that there are more. So yes, on one hand, it's very efficient. It's it reduces cost. It provides more for people. But on the other hand, it's quite fragile if you have a different number of catastrophes happening together. Now we have obviously a pandemic. It could have been something else, like during the tsunami in Japan in 2012. There was suddenly a major drop in manufacturing because a lot of spare parts were manufactured in Japan, in that area. So but that was a small catastrophe. But now we have a global pandemic with the whole world shutting down. So all these just-in-time things don't work anymore. We're going to discover that managers from Florida don't, by magic, get to Chicago or to Toronto, or oranges from or I don't know, peas from Kenya or from Chile don't get by magic to London and Paris and Tokyo. There is actually a process that is not working efficiently right now. Now, I have contacts in the shipping world, and I know that there's still some shipping being done. There is still some commerce and some trade, but it's a very small number of people. And add to that, the fact that you have now, of course, you close borders, and also you have workers in the fields who are sick potentially, and also have to be at home or to be confined. And so who's planting the crops for this summer? So fortunately, this is not a major problem, but theoretically, major concern for me, because I started to ask around for all the farmers in Switzerland and say, guys, are you ready to plant the crops? Because if you don't, we starve this summer. So who's doing the job? So I finally got reassurance that the government understood the problem and called the farmer and said, look, if you have problems, if you have cash issues, if you have, we will get you some money. Indeed, they financed massively every little business so that they could actually work the farms and so on. But then you have the other small economy, because the big companies, the Wall Streets, the huge nationals, they have enough cash to pay their employees for 2-3 months without working, if needs to be. They just take a hit for a quarter, and then it's back to normal. Small plumbing company was 3 employees. Who's going to pay their employees? They don't have the cash. They don't have the treasury for that. They will go down if they don't get help. And then the people who don't get help, how are they going to pay their rent? And the people who own the house, who barely can pay the bank, how can, if people don't pay the mortgage, they go down. So there is a domino effect that is very real. Now, again, fortunately, in this crisis, governments understood that because people still believe that money is worth something, and interest rates are at 0, well, yeah, they can print even more fake money to inject in the business. And I think in the market, and I think today we're at $150 billion every day that is injected in the market to help the economy. And, I'm not a socialist. I don't like that. But I must recognize that, this time the cure needs to be that. And in the end, it's much better than spending it in wars overseas. So after all, why not using this crazy money, this helicopter money right now in the market? But there will be consequences in higher debt and potentially inflation in a longer term, which is going to make our global system even more weak in the future. But at least for this crisis, this year, I think we are going to go through it pretty well, and we're lucky.
And as I mentioned before, I think there will be some recalculations, and there's going to be a change in what governments are willing to accept. Across the West, we've been creating an underclass that's dependent on the government, and that's being done for voting purposes. But it may be a weight that the governments can't hold anymore. If they're not only printing money to pay out, they're also getting less taxes coming back in, because You know, a lot of people are sick, so they're not working, or they're not working because their companies are shut down. If tax revenues drop, spending drops, so then they also don't get sales tax. They may have to recalculate what does a welfare system in Europe mean when there's no money? Who are we going to prioritize? Are we going to have to send people back that aren't working, that were not born here, that still have connections in their country? Maybe we do. Maybe we have to recalculate things. And some of these are calculations that it's better we make them now with a good political excuse than make them in a situation that can cause almost a civil war over it. You know, this is a way that it could be done peacefully.
Piero, talk to me about the, I might pull up an article here on it. Talk to me about the, yeah, I'll pull it up here. Perfect. So talk to me about the potential, the duration that you see happening for all this. Like, you're pretty confident, optimistic. I'm glad to hear that. Other people disagree and other people agree with you. So there's a lot of, obviously in the internet, there's a lot of division on that stuff. But in America, even the government is saying it could last up to 18 months in terms of waves of it, like the flu, right?
Yeah.
Comes in, goes out, comes back in. What do you think about the duration and how that will affect, for example, the economy? You know, going, freezing, like, you know, airlines and shit.
Yeah, I think that first of all we have to look at this containment and this being staying at home policy, and I think this is going to last at least 2 months from the moment it starts, and I don't see how it can be shorter, because they always say 1 month, but they know it's going to be longer. Yeah. Because first of all, if you are in, you know, the idea is that you want to have enough people that are either infected and survive, which is most of the people, or people who are not infected and not in touch with the virus. Therefore, after a while, there's not enough people carrying a live virus that they can infect other people. So to do this, having people staying at home, well, what's going to happen in the first 15 days? If anyone who's infected is at home, he or she infects everyone else in that home. So that's 15 to 20 days. And then you have to wait for these other people who got infected another 15 to 20 days so that they either survive or die, which, again, most of them will survive, no problem. So it pushes you to 40 days, and you need to at least add another cycle to be really sure that there wasn't a guy hidden in a closet that didn't, you know, so that you get another 60 days. So that's 2 months. And then you probably can get people out. And by the way, once again, we're lucky. And what's going to happen is that after 2 months, people realize, but hold on a second, no one died. No one I know. Yeah, the granddad from my friend, yes. But after all, it wasn't such a bloodbath. So, okay, we can restart the economy. And yes, the government says this can last 18 months. What it's actually saying that there could be people who are infected in other countries which have a delay for whatever reason, maybe weather, maybe climate, and then travel back and reinfect some of the people who are not infected. Or perhaps there is a second strain or a slightly mutated strain that comes in. But once again, first of all, there will be no need for containment at this time, and there will be no need for shutting down the economy a second time, because most people will have immune system. And if there is a new strain, 99% of the time, a virus mutates to a lesser killer, a less virulent system, because it just makes sense. If it kills more, it doesn't spread. And as all living things, it wants to spread. And the best way to spread is to be a parasite and not a killer. And a virus is a sort of parasite. We don't really understand what it is in terms of a live being. It's a strange live being. It's not really alive, but it is alive. So it's and therefore the second wave is not going to be that bad. And so people usually say to this, oh, but the second wave of the Spanish flu was harder than the first. The spreading was slower at the time because there were no planes. There was not such an international travel. And in fact, by the way, borders were instituted 150 years ago to stop plagues, to stop cholera and plagues like that. And the Spanish flu, which was a Chinese flu, was an exception because of World War I. There were soldiers traveling from one continent to the other and therefore spreading the disease despite the despite the borders which were not taken care anymore. In fact, it was called the Spanish flu because the Spanish were the only ones who mentioned that flu, because everyone else was under war censorship. Every other country didn't talk about it because it was censoring the news. So today we're not censoring news, or at least not in the same way. We're probably censoring shows like ours and yours, but they're not censoring this. In fact, they were actually downplaying in January, and then now they're overplaying it. But I think the next phase, people will be smarter and say, well, hold on a second, this is not that dangerous. And now we want accountability on these things, because you guys have been too slow. The World Health Organization was the first one to say, oh yeah, it's dangerous, but we can keep flying. Yeah, the hell you're going to pay for that, my friends, because you shut down the economy. People lost their jobs. There's going to be economic disasters. I mean, not cataclysmical, but still pretty bad. So
bankruptcies and stuff.
Yeah, there will be bankruptcy. Then not every government, the welfare government of the West, despite their horrible philosophy, they will at least be able to keep the economy alive. But a lot of countries in South America, in Africa, and all that, they will be slaughtered, economically speaking. And even hospital-wise, there's going to be trouble. But I think we will grow smarter from this, because when you suffer, you learn. And then when the weak, the 100-pound leftist guy starts to say that we should perhaps, like they're suggesting this in France, that it's not fair that people in prison can get infected, so we should let them go home. I mean, these people, these leftist people, if I say the deep thoughts that I have, I think we should go for a travel on helicopters. But anyway, that's just me.
Yeah. South American style. Yeah. Yep. Or that was out in Chile. They were throwing the communists out of it was Chile, I think. Yeah, throwing the communists out of the helicopter.
Yeah, I don't like that kind of stuff, but sometimes it's necessary.
Well, we have to see that people that are advocating things that end up with millions of people dead. If you're advocating open borders, and open borders is part of the problem that has caused the plague, you've murdered people, and we have to take it seriously. And I think it's hard to do that in the theoretical, but we're not facing the theoretical now. We're facing reality, and things are going to change because we're facing reality. A lot of my male clients have been saying recently, I feel like more of a man during this, because I have to think ahead. I have to plan. Things are serious. There's actual danger, even if it's a very small amount. And it's changing how I'm viewing the world. Guys who are dating, they're saying all of a sudden their girlfriend is getting in line and saying, what do you want us to do? What should we do? What are we going to do next? And relying on them. And, gender roles are normalizing, things like that. We also...
all of a sudden the feminists are no longer strong, independent women. All of a sudden they're little girly girls.
Yeah. Well, in times of crisis, men come out of it very well. We do well in times of crisis, because our entire thing that we do is we take chaos and we turn it back into order again. So when the world's going chaotic, there's suddenly a demand for our services. And I do think that on the second time around, not only will the virus be different and therefore probably less lethal, but people are going to start recalculating what's important. A lot of people who've been letting their health go are going to say, I don't want to be a victim next time around. Man, my friend, he nearly died from it in the hospital. He was really sick, and I'm worse health than he was. If I'd gotten it, I could have died. And people will start making that calculation. I think we're going to see an end to the body positivity movement, because you're either the proponents are either going to die in hospital, or their advice will die because it will become unpopular. People will say, this is the potential already. It's the underweight and the overweight that are at the highest risk. It's smokers. It's people taking drugs. People say, it's harmless. Do this, it's harmless. Well, and people are dying from it now. Reality has caught up with us. And this is the plague of 2020. What's the plague of 2021? It might not be coronavirus. It might be something completely different. And the people who prepare physically, mentally, and economically, and prepare themselves are the ones that will come out of anything better off.
Yeah, that's, the year you mentioned, it's the plague of 2020. But in addition to that, I was researching the hurricane patterns, expectations for 2020. And it's not looking too bad for Florida and eastern, United States, America. but it's supposed to be above average. It's supposed to be actually more storms than usual, more severity, a little bit. So that might happen here in America for Florida and these other states, and that's going to be on top of all the bullshit happening now. Even if the coronavirus dies down, that's going to smack people in the face. But maybe this time they'll be prepared. In Florida, you think all the Floridians would be prepared for hurricanes, and they never are. I am, but I'm 1 out of 10 people that do that, and they tell you every year. They bitch, they're like prepare. Nobody fucking does it.
Well,
they have 2 days worth of food, and they're fucked. So
I must say that I must congratulate you on one thing. You invited
Thank
me
Yeah.
in Poland to tell your audience, your family, your tribe to prepare. And a lot of them eventually read my book. I'm in touch with some of them as they ask questions and so on. Well, these guys are ready. They have been ready for what's happening now.
Yeah.
And so now I have people calling me desperate, saying, "How can I buy a gun? How can I plant my? What can I do? Do I need to?" And I say, "You know what? Right now you can't do much. It's too late. You're in the middle of the storm. In the middle of the storm, you don't make a strategy. You apply whatever strategy you have, and if you don't, well, learn. It's too late to learn to swim. You need to make that boat go through that storm.
They're gonna learn the hard way.
But get ready for the next one, because Noah was right, and we're lucky. We still have oil, we still have energy, cheap. We still have intellect, power within people. Okay, a lot of us have been have been shunned by the media, have been caricaturized, have been censored, but they will not be able to do that much longer, because people will just say, well, fuck, we go to alternative media for starts. Everyone is on BitChute, everyone is on other platforms, and also, after a while, you learn the people who predicted things. And I can in the book you have, if you look there is a chapter which basically talks about the unpredictable things. There is a chapter on viruses, and of course, in this one, 2016, when it came out in French first, there is a chapter on coronavirus as being one of the possible emerging new illnesses. And at the time, there was MERS-CoV, and these viruses is actually MERS-CoV-2. But so we added a little chapter on it to be sure to be up to date. But these things, we told people what to do. We told people what to prepare. But the media say, "Oh no, it's doomsaying," And I said, well, it happens all the time. It just didn't happen for the last 30 years, but it happens all the time. And in fact, viruses have happened every year in the last 20 years, and we list some of them. And there's a lot of them. Now, fortunately, most of them didn't reach the West too much. They didn't do many deaths across the world, but they had localized. Some of them have localized the carnage. I mean, Ebola in 2015, that's 15,000 dead. That's slightly above the right now, but obviously it was localized in a few countries, and it's not a virus that spreads easily. It's a heavy. Anyway, we explain why in the book. This one spreads easily, but fortunately it doesn't kill much. Who knows? In the future we'll have a combination of high spread, high mortality. Fortunately, we don't have that right now. So it's time to the time to get prepared is always now.
Well, and I think that it's good that everyone's kind of experiencing this together. When I was a kid, a virus passed through the area where I was living in Canada, and a friend of mine who was a couple years younger than me, he ended up in the hospital temporarily paraplegic. My brother lost his eyesight and was basically a vegetable the rest of his life. And my mom went blind, which she eventually recovered from, but it took her about 6 months. My brother and I got it. We were very sick, but we didn't have permanent damage because we got it like 3 or 4 days after my youngest brother got it. And so they already knew what to do. They knew to give anticonvulsants if you started to convulse and other things, but it happened to affect the spinal fluid. And so it would get into your brain and cause swelling. And it paralyzed about 2 or 3 dozen young people in the city that I lived in. Wow. And it was extremely serious because if it wasn't for medical care, every one of those kids would have died. And many of the ones who didn't end up with any long-term disability, they would have died as well because they managed to make an intervention early enough. But this is almost a yearly occurrence that we have something happening, and it's that you have to prepare. Maybe that's why I think about preparing more, is because I've pass through that experience. But I think it's going to change. There'll be before the coronavirus and after. It's going to change how people think about things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be a huge event, yeah, on level with like 9/11 in terms of influence and impact, things like that, at least in psychology and for people in the economy. Yeah, Piero, by the way, so you mentioned I love having you speak at the convention. I hope to have you speak in the future again. Obviously, I was going to invite you to Poland. We're going to do Krakow, Poland, but I don't know if that's going to happen now in August. I'm
I
still
don't
kind of
know.
waiting on that,
Too
but
soon. Yeah.
yeah, too soon.
I honestly doubt by July we'll be able to have. See, my family was planning to visit the US in the end of July. I think it's not going to happen. By the
Yeah.
way, nothing. This is not genius stuff, but hey, it was mentioned. This is the kind of stuff you need to buy. For example, it's not complicated. Of course, you cannot buy it right now, but 6 months ago, 3 months ago, 2 months ago, you could.
Yeah.
So next time you have everything in this kind of books. But once again, what Noah said is also very interesting, because we are lucky today to have international news, and we need to find out what is true, what is not true. But at least we have communications. And indeed, in the past, we had, for example, the last big flu, not H1N1, which I actually caught. I caught everything. I think I caught this one, by the way. I was really bad for 2 days, and then I destroyed it. But the one that was I think is 1969, 1.5 million people died from the Hong Kong flu of 1969, and then there was one in 1958, which was also quite a killer, like something like 13,000 dead just in France alone, for example, and spread across the world. But indeed, no one knew. However, as a guy who prepares for you and your family and your neighbors, the strategy needs to be thought nonetheless, because the strategy is: what if the hospitals are overwhelmed or closed? Can you treat yourself for most stuff? And does this mean that you need to boost your immune system? Yes. Does it mean you need to check out your nutrition? And then, or you go down in the strategy. If you need to have a good nutrition, it means that you need to have healthy, seasonal, organic food. So how do you get that? Well, some you grow on your own, some you buy to trusted farmers and trusted sellers, etc., etc. So you develop your strategy, and then you deploy it across so many fields of your life, so many aspects: relationships, the food, the filtering water, having a healthy lifestyle, moving your body, having friends, sleeping well, etc., etc. And all of this is, it's a no-brainer, kind of. But 200 years ago, people didn't know that. They had some good hunches, but they didn't have the science to back it up. And today, people, they should know, but they don't care. And this is why these books and these shows and people who have knowledge, I think Noah and I, we both do consulting to people on helping them how to do a lot of things: relationships, healthy lifestyle. I do consulting for strategy of survival. So basically, I help them to go through all the little steps and finding the devil is in the detail, the mistakes that can happen because you didn't plan. I have clients, they are divorced. Now, who's gonna survive where, and who's gonna get the children in such a scenario? A lot of messes can happen because people suddenly lose their mind because they say, "No, I will have the children," and they go and kidnap them and so on. And then it's not a big crisis, and then the police comes to you and say, "Ha, you kidnapped the kids. Ha, you didn't think it through. You didn't think it through because you thought with your emotions and you didn't plan." And we men are good at planning. This is another advantage we have. So this is why people say, "Well, it's a big book." Yeah, because we have to give the historical perspective, and we have deep. I have a lot of interviews in this book of specialists. In the case of pandemics, I interview one of the top specialists in the area in Geneva. We have one of the top hospitals in the world for curing new pandemics, emerging illnesses. And so I interviewed the guy, and it was very interesting because everything he said is exactly what the governments are setting up. And they say, there is no plan for quarantine. And in fact, there is no quarantine. They're actually saying to people, please stay home and let us shut the shops. But there's no more plan for quarantine. And people who read the book, they knew it, because we would expect, okay, let's shut down everything like they did in China. But there's no such plans in the West. We cannot do these things anymore because culturally it's not acceptable. We cannot shut down a city. And so when Italy did, everyone was shocked. And in Switzerland, and like most of the world, they actually don't quarantine. They just ask people to stay home, to be confined, and all of this was explained, so you understand the context. Because what happens if you are stuck in your city, as I could have in Geneva, but everything I have to survive and have a good life during that time is here in the farm I am right now. This is not the office, so I don't have the proper setting for such an interview. But it doesn't matter, I can still do it. But we can, if you're too late to act, if you haven't planned it through, you get stuck in the small apartment, and then it can happen other things. Now, I'm confident that this crisis will be sorted out, but there was a scenario where it doesn't, and there is a scenario of martial law, and there is a scenario of looting, and there's a scenario of civil unrest. So far, I've not seen looting or a lot of unrest anywhere, and it's good, and let's hope it continues. But all of this is part of planning and having the right strategy. So this is why you need to. It's not just let's store food and a gun, and no. It's much more complex. It's not that hard, but it's more complex.
And a lot of it's up here too. It's in the mindset. You know, there's millions of people that showed absolutely zero concern for their health and well-being are suddenly worried that they're going to get a random virus and kill them. And I remember it was a previous virus a few years back, and people complaining about it on TV. And they had a bunch of chronically like massive people complaining that the government's got to do something. I don't want to die of this virus. Meanwhile, they're making choices that are going to kill them 20, 30 years earlier than they could have lived anyway. So it's you know, if you're not right up here, it doesn't matter what physical preps you have. You're not going to make good decisions. And, you know, you can follow a plan and you can buy a bunch of stuff, but that's not what keeps you alive. And you've mentioned this quite a few times, Piero, about the importance of the community. You know, the first thing I did was I went around and knocked on my neighbors' doors, and you know, some of them they like to look out the window, so I went and, you know, waved to them and say, "Hey, look, if you get sick, and because I have some old people here, if you get sick or if you are afraid to go out, you know my phone number, because I gave them all my phone number long ago. Phone me. We'll go to the shopping. We'll bring you the stuff. We'll put it on your door. We'll knock on the door, and you take it away." You know, I went and talked to the other men, and I said, if things get bad, we got to look out for each other. You know, we got to, if we have to, you know, how will we, you know, park a car in front of the door to block the doors to the apartment, what we have to do to protect ourselves. And then the other guy's like, yeah. If things get bad, that makes sense. They wouldn't have networked on their own. There needs to be, if you are inclined that way, you need to take the lead on it, because a lot of men will follow, but they're not willing to lead. And so it doesn't mean there's something wrong with them. It's just, that's who they are. And we men who are interested in this and interested in our family survival need to take the lead and stimulate the men around us to think about this.
Yeah, it's important to remember that most men are some variation of beta or blue pill and things like that in the manosphere we talk about. They're just not, they will follow, but they've been conditioned to, you know, disown their masculinity and apologize for it for years. And now that's coming to have consequences. But I do agree with you that men will follow when you step up to lead, especially red pill, you know, the red men, so to speak.
Yeah, and if they know you're there, if things get bad, you'll see the attitude change. Sometimes there'll be a little like eye rolling for now, and then you see things get bad. And I've seen that. I've seen this because I started this before. Telling people this, you know, someone new moves into my neighborhood or like one of the buildings close to me, I'll often knock on the door and say hello and, you know, let them know my phone number and stuff in case there's a problem. And you know, I'll mention, I prod them a little bit to see how awake they are, if they're red pilled or not. And I'll get some eye rolls, and I'm not getting any eye rolls right now. No. I'm getting a lot of earnest seriousness from people.
Piero, I wanted to give a special mention as well. You know, you actually had this guy write a foreword to your book, Dmitry Orlov, and I actually invited him to speak at the 21 convention back in 2010, I think, after reading this book, Reinventing Collapse, which is part of what got me into survival preparation anyway, back in the late 2000s, 2009, 2010. So is he a friend of yours, Dmitry? Do you know him?
Yep, I translated his book into French.
No shit.
Right.
Damn.
It's a great book.
It's a great book. And, I agree.
So I wrote, he wrote a foreword to actually this book. I must, yes, it's still,
yeah.
I just received it literally yesterday. So yeah, he made the foreword, right?
Yeah. Fuck yeah, nice.
And,
yeah, it's a great book. One of the best I've read.
to add on what Noah just said, which I couldn't agree more. Actually, right now, as you were calling for the show, I was actually sorting out some extra medics that I had in some of the cardboards, and so I'm just making. So here's an antibiotic box, and I'm just sorting out whatever thing I think I have too much of right now, and I want to know that I have them at hand, because indeed, if hospitals are overwhelmed, and if the kid of the neighbor or my kids, of course, hurt themselves and get an infection or something, and if the hospital maybe is overwhelmed and say, look, we don't have antibiotics, we don't have any medicine left, whatever, I have everything that is needed here. I have stuff for eye infection, for blood infection, for a lot of stuff. So I just wanted to make a short inventory so that I can indeed go to my neighbors and say, oh, by the way, if you need medicine, I can get you some. I'm not going to say that I have everything here, but I'm going to say I know how to get you some. Don't worry. It's going to cost you nothing. It's part of the, don't worry. I have that for you. I have your back. And so sometimes people say, oh, but survivalist people are selfish and all, but this makes no sense to be selfish. You want to be open with your neighbors because, maybe tomorrow I have a problem. I don't get fresh eggs, and my neighbors has chicken and he can give me fresh eggs. Whatever, it doesn't matter. We are a community, and this is how humans evolve: is to be part of a group of 100, 150 people,
yeah.
the Dunbar number, and a group of men, as John Jack Donovan mentioned in his books. We must be feeling part of a group of men who help each other and who actually push each other to be better and more forward thinking and better planning, because I can tell you the next crisis, everyone will have the same inventory of medicine, because I want to make sure that everyone gets the idea in the village and in the town. So that's how we improve. That's how we get better, because we have forgotten all this, which shows only common sense.
Well, and the most important prep is to prep your community around you.
Yeah. Yeah, I was keeping up, for example, recently a friend of mine, he was stocking up on ammunition. This is weeks ago now. He's in the military, so he was getting ahead on this. And I was surprised that he had less than 1,000 rounds of ammo at his house. I always keep more than 1,000 with me at my home, well over 1,000. And I hopefully never use any of it. I don't ever want to use any of it for home invasion or looting or whatever the fuck's going on. But I always want to have a lot because I want to be able to arm my neighbors. I don't have enough guns to arm them, but I have enough ammo to help out. A box here, a box there, easy. And in America, it's legal, it's easy to do this, and it's cheap. And what I do, one of the things, I'll be interested to hear what you guys think about this, but I've been reading self-help books for a long time, since I was 17 years old, starting in 2005. Tony Robbins, shit like that, as well as, many other things too, Survival, Dmitry Orlov, and all that. But it's always the self-help gurus, the Tony Robbins, they say, small changes have a big effect. So it's these tiny little daily changes you make, these little habits you form that build big things. And the reason I have so much ammunition is because every time I go to the gun range, I buy a little ammo for there to shoot, and then I buy an extra box or two. Yeah. So every time I go, I come back home with an extra 100 rounds of ammo. You go shooting a couple times a year. This racks up over the years. And so that's how I actually have so much ammo. I never went out and bought, 2,000 rounds of ammo on the internet or at a store. I just slowly accumulated over a couple of years now. And that's why I have so much fucking ammo.
Yeah, it's the same way. Like every week since January, we've bought 2 weeks of groceries.
Yeah, nice.
We're prepared.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, I was saying to my audience, in January, in February, and say, okay, make sure you iron out whatever preparation you need, and probably you don't actually need more canned beans because you probably have that already. But stock on oranges, bananas, mangoes, stuff that you won't get in the next 2 months, especially in this season. So that, and even I did that. I bought crates of oranges and lemons to have vitamin C in the natural form. I went to get mangoes. Okay, we've eaten them. No more mangoes for the foreseeable future. And some bananas because the kids love that stuff. Okay, and now there's no more bananas and mangoes. We're going to move to something else. And now we are eating we have books on how to find out what plants are edible in the wild. So we are roaming the fields, and it's a game. It's a family thing, and as part of the at least daily we walk around, and so we say, hey, this plant looks like something that we can eat. And we had salads. Actually, yesterday evening we had salad with some some of the plants that grow right now, and it was delicious. So, and it's a game. So we have to have this kind of enjoying as well the moment. This is something that often, and I certainly am guilty of not mentioning this too much in my books, but we have to turn this crisis into something that we enjoy ourselves with the family and the neighbors. Where, for example, I went in the basement and I checked out all the canned raviolis that are way over the due date of the can. And so they're still edible, of course, and they're not that tasty. They're not great. But anyway, so I went to the neighbor and said, hey, guys, let's have a ravioli party because I need to finish that thing. And it's a joke, but it's a funny joke because we bring a sense of humor into a situation that can be a bit dark for some people.
Yeah.
And so we make it fun. And we have these horrible raviolis and we drink a lot with it. And therefore, we have a happy evening and fuck the virus.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, it's often I'm from Canada, so my ancestors sometimes had to spend 3-4 months in the winter frozen in their farm, and they'd be frozen in there, and there were people who died frozen in their farm with food around them because they just lost the will to live from being stuck indoors from that long. Wow. And they just stopped filling the fireplace with wood, and they stopped making food, and they just died, and they'd be found the next spring. And they had a whole series. I remember when I was a kid, them telling me, you know, we read the Bible every day, we talk, we play games with each other, we sing, everyone played an instrument. They would, the girls would knit, the boys had a whole load of chores to do to look after the animals that were out in the barn and chopping wood and all that kind of stuff. And so everyone had something to do. They kept busy, they were happy. And, you know, that's kind of worse in a way than this virus because storm where you're stuck 3-4 months, such snow that you can't walk to your barn without hooking on to a hook. Wow. Is on a zip line, because if you lost the zip line, you'd be frozen 10 feet from your house and not see it, and you'd die. And they talked to me about this, and they had 16 kids because, you know, you have a kid every spring this way. You get stuck inside that long, there's nothing else to do. But they had a very tight-knit family. They loved each other. They got along well. And we're going to have to remake our view of the world into one where we're okay with a bit of uncomfortableness. Now, this is something we talk about in the Manosphere, getting uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. Sorry, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah,
it's extremely important. We've gotten way too soft in the world today, and that softness puts us at great risk. And if we can learn to have some fun and laugh in the face of danger, you know, I put a little skull behind me here. You can see by the corner of my head. Put a little skull to remind me that, you know, death is somewhere behind you and not to worry about it. And our ancestors, they had a very different relationship to death than we have. It wasn't a big deal to them. You know, people died, they died. And it was, oh, you'd be sad about it for sure. But they didn't fear it quite the same the way we fear it. They almost joked about it. You know, they laughed at it. They literally laughed in the face of death. And that gave them a kind of power that, you know, they got little rickety wooden boats and sailed around the world. They did kinds of things, you know, that we would just never want to take that kind of risk now. And they did that, and that was their normal life.
Yeah.
I have a feeling one of the good things that'll come out of this is we're going to be a little bit less afraid of death.
I agree.
Yeah, more ravioli. Noah, one of the things you mentioned too with the barn thing.
Memento mori was what the Latins used to say. Remember that you're mortal.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Noah, one of the things you mentioned. So you guys are talking here about basically kind of leisure and recreation, staying positive. These are mental health things actually that they benefit mental health. I know one of the things that you mentioned that came to mind, Noah, was being stuck in those barns, frozen. Parts of the world now, you know, I live in Florida, so I have unlimited sun, even now under quarantine or all this bullshit, right? I can go for a walk. I just went for a walk this morning. I didn't get sick. There was nobody coughing on me and shit like that, right? No dogs attacking me in the street. But vitamin D and sunshine are huge for fighting depression, staying for mental health. And it sounds like that's like what happened, though. They went depressed and why. So depression, I think, is an issue right now that a lot of people could be facing. But vitamin D and sunshine are huge for that. They have major benefits on your melatonin levels, sleep cycles, vitamin D, cholesterol, all kinds of stuff, including your immune system. Huge.
Yep.
Like I have
Yeah,
I have a baby nephew, and I'm telling my little sister to make sure she takes my little nephew out in the sun every day, 15, 20 minutes every day, every day, every day, directly on the skin. It's as I understand it, it's the most crucial element to the immune system, above even beyond vitamin C and zinc and things like that. Vitamin D, all that stuff,
and it's
100%.
free. You just get sun exposure. It's
Yeah.
not hard. Now, I live in Portugal, so we also have like 300 and something days of sun a year. And
Wow.
I'll go out to the front of the building, put out a blanket, put the little babies. I got 2 5-month-old twins. Put them out on the blanket, and they get 15, 20 minutes. I get half an hour, 45 minutes. My wife and my other son will get whatever until they feel too hot, and they'll go back in at the zenith of the sun. So when it's at its highest.
Yeah.
And it makes a big difference. You know, it really does help you. Probably why I look a little red.
Yeah. Piero, talk to me about your criticisms of the government responses, particularly between Europe and America, which have been a little bit different. Like, Donald Trump to close down, for example, travel to China in January, and he was getting screamed that he was racist and stuff. And then, of course, everyone's still bitching endlessly about everything, but there are some legitimate criticisms, I believe.
Yeah, once again, I don't want to be too harsh now, because now is not the time to make accountability, but definitely the international instances for health have been so the CDC in the US, or the
WHO.
the World WHO, which is not far from which is in Geneva, where I live most of the week. Well, they have been really slow into assessing the data and the potential gravity of the situation, and they must have had even better data than the public, which is basically very fragmentary and once again unsure from China. But I think there has been some the images from China where they were piling dead in the streets and having crematoriums working 24/7 got the psychosis started, because once again there was only two strategies. One strategy was to do nothing, and this illness would have burned through the population. People would have felt sick. 1%, 0.5% dead in average, perhaps the higher with older people. And we should have done, and then you do triage in the hospital, saying, well, if you're above 80, we don't treat you. Too bad. And that's it. It would have been gone by June, and that's done. The other would have been shut down every fucking flight with China. Actually, shut down every border and every flight for a month, and then this thing dies in China, and that's it.
These countries are too much of the pussies, though, the leaders around them, basically, to do that kind of stuff. Right?
But we did a little bit of both, and it was a bit too little, too late. And you didn't want to kill your economy, and you didn't want, it's going to be expensive. The airlines, they need. And so now we have basically the economy in emergency, and it will need to be shocked into life again through monetary and fiscal policies, which are disastrous in long term. And the politicians, no one had the balls to take either one decision, so they did a little bit of both, and it ends up with something that is blown out of what it should have been, out of proportions. Now, I don't want to be too harsh, again, because I understand if you're in that position, taking that decision to say, I shut down everything, or to say, I do nothing because we're stronger than this thing, it takes balls, but obviously no one has them.
Yeah. We're kind of lucky that Italy got it. They're 2, 3, 4, maybe 4 weeks ahead of other countries.
Yeah.
We're lucky they are, so that we have some idea of a reliable model for how the epidemic spreads, because we can't rely on what China's telling us. And if we didn't have that, I have a feeling we would not have seen any quarantines until we were all at where Italy is right now. And then all of a sudden we would have been completely too late. We've gotten lucky a bunch of times, not being really that deadly a virus, having a first world reliable country get sick first, like weeks ahead of everyone else. And I think this was the best outcome we could have hoped for, given the situation. If you're a politician and you act too soon, you get crucified. You act too late, you get crucified. And so very often the job is to cover your ass and diffuse responsibility to other people. and everyone's doing that. I think that for the next epidemic, we're going to have some changes in that kind of culture. I think there's going to be a lot less ass covering, because ass covering is going to get you in more trouble than actually dealing with it in the future.
Yeah,
and even Donald Trump, who I think is probably the less worst guy that we could have hopes in the world to lead the America, for sure, by far. While in January his re-election was absolutely for sure he would have been re-elected, and then in February until recently I thought maybe he has played it. He played his game there in a really bad way, but now I'm starting to think that he's back in the game and he's going to win again nonetheless, because in fact he is showing leadership. He was hesitant. He was a bit. Maybe he had the real data, and just like us, like me, he thought, well, it's not a big deal after all. But then you have to act because everyone is acting.
Well, he's also a germ freak. I don't know if you know that, but he's been known for decades that he hates fucking germs. He hates shaking hands. So I was wondering if he's personally just freaked out by it too, because he hates germs more than anything. In his books he writes about this. He's been trying to abolish the handshake in America for decades. He's serious. He talks about that shit.
There is another possibility that the crisis was allowed to happen on purpose when it was realized the virus wouldn't kill everybody.
Yeah, could be.
Because we needed a crisis.
It's possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's some conspiracy theories, but I agree there's possibilities too. I mean, look all the benefits it's having. Homeschooling, people getting red pilled, all the borders are closed. Everybody's cheering, he's my president now, give me the helicopter money. Like,
because we might end the general quarantine. Here in Portugal, the quarantine has come in phases. We might end it in phases too. I don't believe school will start up again until September here.
Yeah. Same here.
And so you're going to have a pretty long period. And how many people are going to say, I've had to adapt so much to homeschooling. My wife had to leave her job, all this. We might as well just continue. Look, the kids are so much happier. And so I think it's going to, there's a whole bunch of countries where homeschooling was not illegal, but it was very frowned upon and made very difficult. And all of a sudden they're making it easier.
Yeah. Making it mandatory, basically.
Or mandatory, yeah.
Yeah. Piero, so let's kind of start winding down here. I have a question that I think a lot of guys would like to know. What is the average guy not seeing right now? Like, maybe they failed to prepare and these different things, and they don't know what the fuck the media is, throwing all this bullshit out. Who knows what to believe? It's hard. But what is the average guy not seeing? Is there a long-term, short-term thing that they're not seeing?
Besides everything we've talked until now, I think the average guy is not aware of how food gets grown, and that spring is the time that you must get the crops going for the summer, and that everything that we can do to help the farming system to keep going, and I'm really talking about the organic and the farming system next to where you live, of course. I mean, of course, the big farms, the cornfields in the Midwest, they will work, but the real healthy food that you have next to where you live, take this as an opportunity to know the farmers, to know who they are, where they are, if they need anything. Maybe they need some supplies, maybe they need some masks, whatever, if you have some to spare, because they are feeding you, and they're going to feed you this summer and this fall and next winter. So make sure they can work properly, and make sure they get their job done. And maybe it's time to make petition to your elected official to actually say, well, look, local organic farming is really important. How about we stop all these stupid subsidies for corn syrup and fodder for feeding animals, and instead we help the organic meat growers, the good local short distance farming from where you live, so that you have healthy seasonal and short distance vegetables and fruits and all that you need. Eggs and poultry that is of high quality, high nutritious content, good for your health, and all this crap. Now, I know it's easier to say than to do, and that, as you said, people have these bad habits of eating, and I've been guilty of that. I've lost a lot of weight since last time you saw me in Poland. But definitely, it is part of what we need to do to to be healthy, and you cannot do it just on your own. You need to have your community around you to be involved, and that includes the farming. So I think this is the element that perhaps people don't see in this crisis, is that food that we're going to eat from the summer to the winter is getting planted now, and we need to make sure.
All right, fuck yeah. This has been a great episode, man. Everybody's watching. Make sure that you check out Piero's books. His newest one here is just translated into English. You can get it on Amazon while they're still delivering it for now. CBRN, and it's on Amazon. And he's got a co-author as well, Chris Millennium. You can check it out here. He also, not Reinventing Collapse, but he also has Survive. Let's see if we could find that. Boom. Make sure you pick this up. And like Piero mentioned as well, he did speak at the 21 Convention 2019 of Warsaw, Poland. And as you guys can imagine, I have a rush order on editing that speech and getting it out on 21 University as well as on YouTube. So you guys can check that out pretty soon. His full speech actually is that focused on survival and masculinity and things like that. It was a very good fit at the event. It's very well received and a great speech. I'll put it out to you guys as soon as I can. This has been episode 101 of Surviving the Apocalypse. Links to his books and his website and channel are in the video description. I'll put as well for Noah's. Noah, Piero, thanks for coming on the show. Any last words?
Stay alive. Stay alive for next week.
Stay safe.
Yeah, survival, right? Surviving is the ultimate life-affirming action. Survive. Just like the book, survive.
Yeah, life's the antidote to death. So survive.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. See you next week at 11 a.m. Guys, I'm in the live broadcast. We can stay on privately. Adios, guys. Boom.